Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to cut through the noise, taking all that global information, everything from, well, subatomic particles to huge geopolitical shifts.
So there's a lot of it this week.
Right. And we distill it down into what you really need to know to understand this interconnected world we're living in.
We've got a pretty hefty stack of sources today. Definitely heavy on the science and space side, but also some really critical geopolitical developments. Think escalating conflicts, big tech moves, political gridlock. It's all in there.
Yeah, and our job really is to connect those dots for you. How does something like visualizing the speed of light actually relate to, say, a government shutdown? It might seem random, but often isn't.
Exactly. We want to give you the context, the so what behind the headlines, and hopefully those aha moments that make it all click.
So you get informed quickly, but also deeply. Let's jump right in. Okay, first up, we're starting with some fundamental physics. And this one is genuinely, well, mind-bending. Researchers have actually figured out a way to make the speed of light visible. Like, you can watch photons travel.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. It takes something we usually just think of as a number, 186,000 miles per second, and makes it, well, experiential.
How on earth do they even do that, capturing something moving that fast?
It's a combination of really advanced tech. They're using something called femtosecond photography, basically. Cameras with unbelievably fast shutter speeds.
Femtoseconds, that's quadrillions of a second.
Quadrillions, exactly. Yeah. Ultra-short pulses of light are fired, lasting only femtoseconds. And the camera captures these pulses, but not as one image. It captures numerous, incredibly thin slices of the light as it bounces off an object. Then they use some pretty sophisticated algorithms, computational techniques, to stitch all those slices back together.
Ah, okay. So it's like building a 3D movie frame by frame, but the frames are these incredibly thin light slices.
That's a good way to put it. You end up with a three-dimensional visualization of the light pulse actually moving, reflecting, bending. You see the whole process unfold in space and time.
Wow. So you're not just seeing the light hit a surface, you're seeing the journey. What's the practical use for this, beyond just being unbelievably cool?
Well, the cool factor is high, but the big win is likely in education and research. Think about explaining things like reflection or refraction or even tougher concepts in relativity.
Yeah, it's usually all diagrams and math.
Exactly. This gives students and researchers, too, a visual, sort of intuitive handle on how light behaves. It makes these really abstract physics concepts suddenly much more concrete, more memorable.
That makes sense. It could really democratize understanding some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, moving from light speed to something researchers are calling the dark matter of electronics.
Right. This involves a breakthrough in quantum computing, specifically with something called dark excitons. This work comes out of the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology, or OIST.
OIST in Japan. Okay, quantum computing. The big challenge there is always stability, isn't it? Qubits are just so fragile.
That's precisely the problem they're tackling. Qubits, the basic units of quantum information, are notoriously delicate. They lose their quantum state, what we call coherence, almost instantly if they interact with their environment. Noise, temperature changes, anything, really.
And that loss of coherence means errors pile up, which is why building large, reliable quantum computers is so incredibly hard.
Exactly. So these researchers are looking at excitons. An exciton basically is a bound state of an electron and the sort of empty spot or hole it leaves behind when it jumps to a higher energy level in a material.
Okay, electron-hole pairs, got it.
Now, a dark exciton is a special kind of exciton. It exists in a quantum state that's considered forbidden for interacting directly with light.
Forbidden, meaning it just doesn't easily absorb or emit photons?
Precisely. And because it doesn't interact easily with light or other environmental disturbances, it's much, much harder to knock out of its quantum state. It's inherently more stable.
Ah, I see. So if normal qubits are like trying to whisper in a hurricane.
Yeah, slight chuckle. That's not a bad analogy. The slightest disturbance wipes out the information. A dark exciton is more like having that whisper happen inside a perfectly soundproofed vault. It's shielded.
Which means it can maintain coherence, its quantum state, for much longer. That's huge for quantum computation. What materials are they using to achieve this?
They're working with these really interesting two-dimensional materials called transition metal dichalcogenides. TMDs for short.
TMDs.
The structure of these TMDs allows these dark excitant states to form and persist. So what here is that this enhanced stability, this longer coherence time, could genuinely shorten the timeline for getting truly reliable, fault-tolerant quantum computers.
Moving beyond the sort of noisy experimental stage we're mostly in now.
Exactly. Towards actual, practical quantum hardware that can tackle problems current computers can't touch.
Okay, that's a major potential leap. Staying out in the cosmos, conceptually at least, let's talk gravitational waves. We know about LIGO, right? The Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory.
Right. LIGO's been amazing detecting those high-frequency ripples from things like colliding black holes or neutron stars, kind of the trouble notes of the universe.
So it's new.
Well, there's innovation now focusing on the base notes. A new generation of detectors is being developed using optical resonators and atomic clocks. These are designed to probe the millihertz frequency range, much lower frequencies than LIGO can pick up.
Millihertz. Why is that frequency range important? What cosmic events make those kinds of waves?
That's where we expect to find signals from truly enormous slow-motion cosmic events. Think supermassive black holes orbiting each other over millions of years before merging, or maybe even gravitational waves left over from the universe's very first moments, the Big Bang itself.
Waves that have been traveling for billions of years. LIGO can't hear those.
Their frequency is just too low, the wavelength too long. It's like trying to hear a foghorn with a microphone designed for a dog whistle. These new detectors are aiming specifically for that low-frequency window.
And these are ground-based detectors, unlike something like LISA.
Yes, that's a key advantage. LISA, the Laser Interferometer Space Antenna, is the big space mission planned for this frequency range, but it's still many years away from launch. These new ground-based detectors, often table-sized, are designed to be less affected by seismic noise, the constant vibrations of the Earth that plague sensitive instruments.
So they could be deployed much sooner.
That's the hope. They could potentially give us a head start, maybe years, on exploring this low-frequency gravitational wave spectrum, opening up a whole new way to study cosmic history before LISA even gets off the ground.
Okay, let's shift gears now from physics to bioscience. And this next one sits right at that slightly unnerving intersection of biology and technology. Scientists are actually growing mini human brains, organoids.
Yeah, brain organoids grown from human stem cells.
And the goal is to use them to power computers. That sounds like something out of a movie.
It does, doesn't it? The field is sometimes called biological computing or organoid intelligence. The core idea driving it is efficiency. The human brain is just astonishingly powerful and efficient.
Runs on, what, like 20 watts? Less than a light bulb.
Exactly. Compared to a supercomputer that needs megawatts and vast cooling systems, and yet the brain handles complex, ambiguous tasks, learning, intuition, in ways silicon chips still really struggle with.
So the hope is to tap into that biological processing power. How do they actually do it?
They start with human cells, often skin cells, and reprogram them back into stem cells specifically, induced pluripotent stem cells, or iPSCs. These can become any cell type.
Okay.
Then they culture these iPSCs in very specific conditions that guide them to develop into three-dimensional structures resembling early-stage brain tissue. These organoids actually develop neurons, synapses, and generate complex electrical activity, somewhat like a fetal brain.
And how you interface that with a computer.
That's the engineering challenge. They're developing systems, arrays of electrodes, and so on to connect these neural networks to conventional electronics. The idea is to feed the organoid data, let it process or learn, and then read out the results.
For tasks like machine learning, maybe pattern recognition, things brains are naturally good at.
Precisely. Especially tasks involving associative learning, adaptation, maybe even a form of biological AI that complements silicon AI.
But, I mean, the ethical questions here just jump right out, don't they? We're talking about mini brains grown from human cells exhibiting complex activity.
Absolutely. The ethical dimension is huge, and frankly, we're way behind the technology. Questions about consciousness, sentience, potential suffering, the moral status of these organoids, they're profound.
At what point does a complex biological network cross some kind of threshold?
We don't know. And what responsibilities do we have towards these entities? It forces us to confront really fundamental questions about what intelligence is, what life is, outside the context of a full human being. The debate is really just starting, and it's intense.
Yeah, one to watch closely. Okay, sticking with the brain, but moving to disease. There's some really significant new research directly linking obesity to the progression of Alzheimer's disease. Not just a correlation, but a mechanism.
Yes, This work, particularly highlighted by researchers at Houston Methodist Institute in Texas, details how excess body fat can harm the brain. It focuses on adipose tissue, fat tissue acting as an active organ, not just passive storage.
Not an endocrine organ,
Well,
right? Releasing hormones and signals.
Exactly. And what they found is that fat cells release these tiny packages called extracellular vesicles. Think of them like little biological mail bags.
Okay.
And critically, these vesicles released by fat tissue can cross the blood-brain barrier, which normally protects the brain.
So fat cells are essentially sending messages directly into the brain. What's in these messages?
Unfortunately, it seems to be a harmful payload. These vesicles carry signals that actually promote inflammation and, crucially, accelerate the buildup of amyloid beta plaques in the brain.
And amyloid plaques are the classic hallmark of Alzheimer's pathology.
Right. So the fat tissue is creating this sort of toxic inflammatory environment systemically throughout the body, and these signals directly reach the brain, worsening the Alzheimer's pathology, making it harder for the brain to clear out these damaging proteins.
That really reframes things.
Mm-hmm.
It suggests that tackling obesity and the inflammation associated with it could be a direct strategy for fighting Alzheimer's.
It certainly opens that possibility. Instead of only focusing on treatments targeting the brain directly, you could also focus on reducing those harmful signals coming from the fat tissue itself, a systemic approach to a brain disease.
Fascinating. Okay, one more in this bio section. Antibiotic resistance, a huge global threat. But there's progress using viruses.
Yes, specifically bacteriophages, or just phages. These are viruses that naturally infect and kill bacteria. Phage therapy isn't new. Actually, it was explored heavily before broad-spectrum antibiotics took over.
But now with superbugs resisting antibiotics, phages are making a comeback.
A very high-tech comeback. The key difference now is precision engineering. Phages are incredibly specific. One type of phage typically only infects one specific strain or type of bacteria.
Unlike antibiotics, which are like carpet bombs, killing good bacteria along with the bad.
Exactly. Antibiotics cause collateral damage and drive resistance. With modern genetic tools, scientists can now identify the exact strain of resistant bacteria causing a patient's infection, say a nasty E. coli, and then select or even engineer a specific phage or a cocktail of phages designed to target only that harmful bacteria.
So it's like a sniper rifle versus a shotgun. Highly personalized medicine against superbugs.
That's the promise. It leaves the patient's beneficial microbiome largely untouched. And the sources also mention advances in diagnostics using reporter phages.
Reporter phages.
These are phages engineered so that when they find and infect their target bacteria, they trigger a signal like making the bacteria light up. This could allow for incredibly rapid diagnosis, maybe in hours instead of days, identifying the specific bug so the right phage treatment can be deployed immediately.
Wow, that's fighting fire with fire, or rather, fighting bacteria with precisely targeted viruses. Very cool. All right, let's shift our gaze outwards now to space, AI, and kind of the geopolitics interwoven with technology, starting with a real cosmic head-scratcher, a rogue planet.
Yeah, a planet just floating freely in space, not orbiting a star. This one's called Che 10107-7626, and astronomers caught it doing something completely unexpected.
Which is it?
It's having a massive growth spurt. It's pulling in surrounding interstellar gas and dust at an absolutely astonishing rate, something like 6 billion tons every single second.
6 billion tons a second for a planet just drifting out there. That's wild. Where's the material coming from?
From the sparse gas and dust clouds that exist between stars, what's really surprising isn't just the amount, but the activity associated with it. Observations detected complex chemistry, including water vapor and even peculiar magnetic fields around this planet.
You know, things you'd normally associate with a young star forming, not a cold, isolated planet.
Exactly. It's behaving more like a protostar, actively accreting material, even though it doesn't have nearly enough mass to ignite nuclear fusion and become a star. It really challenges our neat categories.
So rogue planets might not just be dead, cold wanderers. They could be dynamic.
It certainly suggests their environments and evolution might be far more complex than we assumed, and given there could be billions, maybe even trillions of these rogue planets in our Milky Way galaxy alone, this discovery kind of forces us to rethink planetary formation and evolution outside the context of a traditional solar system.
Huh. Okay, from rogue planets back to human plans for space. Jeff Bezos has been talking again about his vision for humanity's future off-world.
He has. During Italian Tech Week, he doubled down on his prediction, expecting millions of people living and working in large space colonies orbiting Earth within the next couple of decades.
This is based on Gerard K. O'Neill's ideas from the 70s. Right, the giant rotating cylinders.
Yes, exactly. O'Neill envisioned these massive habitats, miles long, spinning to create artificial gravity, housing whole ecosystems, cities, basically artificial worlds in space. Bezos sees this not just as expansion, but as a way to preserve Earth.
By moving heavy industry and eventually a lot of the population off the planet.
That's the core idea. Reduce the environmental burden on Earth by expanding outwards. And, it's not just talk. His company, Blue Origin, just had its 15th successful suborbital flight of the New Shepard rocket.
Carrying tourists.
Tourists, yes, but the bigger picture is demonstrating repeatable, reliable access to space.
Right.
Building O'Neill colonies would require launching enormous amounts of mass cheaply and routinely. These successful commercial flights, while suborbital, are steps toward proving out the kind of robust space infrastructure needed for such ambitious long-term plans.
Right, the enabling technology has to mature. Okay, one more space item, the moon. China's Change of 6 mission brought back samples from the far side. Any interesting findings yet?
Definitely. It's the first time we've had physical samples from the moon's far side, which always faces away from Earth. Early analysis is showing significant temperature differences compared to the near side, based on the composition of the return rocks and soil.
Temperature differences, why does that matter?
The thermal history tells you a lot about the geological evolution. It seems the far side has experienced less volcanic activity, less resurfacing over billions of years, compared to the near side, which has those large, dark mare regions formed by ancient lava flows.
So the far side is more like the moon's original crust.
In many ways, yes. Understanding why the two sides are so different, why one side had massive volcanism and the other didn't, is key to piecing together the moon's entire formation and geological story. These far-side samples provide crucial ground truth for that.
All right, let's bring it back down to Earth, or at least the digital realm. Artificial intelligence. OpenAI is always making moves. They just had their big developer event, Dev Day 2025.
Right. And a key takeaway seems to be a strategic push towards more personalized, consumer-focused AI. A big indicator was what's called an acqui-hire.
Acqui-hire. They buy a company mainly for the talent, not the product.
Exactly. They brought in the CEO and potentially key team members from a company called Roy. Roy was developing an AI specifically as a personal financial companion.
So OpenAI isn't just building giant general-purpose models like GPT. They're actively acquiring expertise in specific, trusted applications like managing your money.
It looks that way. It signals they want to move into areas like personalized finance, maybe health coaching, custom work tools. AIs that individuals rely on daily. This is likely about building user trust, demonstrating tangible value, and probably finding new ways to monetize beyond just charging for API access.
Trying to get ahead of Google, Meta, all the others racing to build AI assistants.
It's a very competitive space, but this focus on personalization inevitably runs straight into data privacy issues, which brings us to this rather controversial case involving Anker's USI security cameras.
UFI. Right, they make smart home stuff. What happened there?
Well, Eufy wanted to improve the AI in their cameras for detecting theft. So they offered owners $2 for every video clip they submitted from their cameras showing activity around their homes.
$2 per video to train their AI.
Yep. And reportedly, hundreds of owners uploaded hundreds of thousands of video clips footage from inside and outside their private homes.
Wow. Okay, on one level, it's crowdsourcing training data, but paying people, even a tiny amount, to hand over their private security footage, that feels ethically tricky.
It's definitely sparking debate. $2 is almost nothing compared to the potential value of that unique real-world training data for improving Eufy's AI product, which is their intellectual property. It raises questions about incentivizing surveillance, normalizing the trade of sensitive personal data for corporate gain, and whether users truly understand the value exchange.
Yeah, what's the real cost of making AI smarter, and who bears it? It seems like a slippery slope.
It highlights that core tension. The immense hunger of AI development for data versus individual privacy rights and the ethics of data monetization.
And speaking of intellectual property, AI is causing headaches there too, especially generative AI like image and video creators. OpenAI's new video model, Sora, is running into this.
Absolutely. Big media companies, Disney was mentioned as an example, are really concerned that these AI models might be trained on their copyrighted material without permission or could mimic their unique styles, essentially infringing on their IP.
So how is OpenAI responding?
Pragmatically, it seems. With Sora, they're reportedly implementing an explicit opt-in system for using data to train or fine-tune the model. They're asking for permission up front.
Instead of just scraping data and waiting to get sued.
Slight chuckle. Pretty much.
Here.
It looks like an attempt to get ahead of the legal battles. By requiring creators or companies to actively agree to let their content be used, OpenAI is trying to build a more defensible legal position and perhaps foster better relationships with the creative industries, acknowledging the value of their IP.
Acknowledging they can't just take everything. That's a potentially significant shift in the AI world. Okay, let's pivot now to some serious geopolitical flashpoints. Starting in the Caribbean Sea near Venezuela. There's been a significant escalation in U.S. military action against alleged drug trafficking.
Yes, a major escalation. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced the fourth U.S. airstrike in this recent campaign. This latest strike hit a boat, killed 4 people alleged to be involved in narcotics transport. That brings the total death toll across these 4 strikes to 11.
And the justification from the Trump administration is pretty stark. They're labeling these individuals nalo-terrorists.
That's the term being used. And critically, the administration has declared a state of non-international armed conflict with these cartels.
Declaring an armed conflict with drug cartels. What does that mean legally?
That's the crux of the controversy. By framing it as an armed conflict, the administration is essentially claiming the legal authority to use military force, including lethal force like airstrikes, that would typically be governed by the laws of war, not law enforcement rules. They're treating cartels like enemy combatants in a war zone.
Even though it's not a traditional war zone? And Congress hasn't declared war or specifically authorized this kind of conflict against cartels.
Right. Legal experts are raising serious red flags. International law has strict rules about extrajudicial killings outside of declared armed conflicts. Declaring a non-international armed conflict with non-state actors like cartels is a very high bar, usually reserved for situations like sustained civil wars. Critics argue this could be seen as an overreach of executive power, potentially bypassing congressional oversight and international legal norms.
It's essentially defining drug trafficking as terrorism to unlock military options.
That seems to be the strategy. And the military commitment is significant. Reports mention 8 U.S. warships deployed to the region. It signals a very aggressive posture, combining counter-narcotics with counter-terrorism language and potentially mixing it with regional politics involving Venezuela. It's a volatile mix.
Indeed. Okay, shifting focus to the incredibly complex situation in Gaza and the ongoing diplomatic efforts. President Trump put forward a peace plan recently.
Yes, a detailed 20-point plan aimed at achieving a ceasefire and outlining a path forward. Key elements include the unconditional release of all hostages held by Hamas, the formation of a transitional government in Gaza, and significantly, the creation of a terror-free zone.
How has that proposal been received, particularly by Hamas?
Well, both Hamas and the group Islamic Jihad have responded. Reports suggest they've partially accepted or at least voiced support for Hamas's counterproposals or response to the plan. President Trump himself called their willingness to engage encouraging.
And the international community? The UN?
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres also welcomed Hamas's response, framing it as a positive step and reiterating the urgent need for an immediate and lasting ceasefire for everyone involved. So, diplomatically, there are signs of potential movement.
But, and it's a huge but, the fighting on the ground hasn't stopped.
No, that's the grim reality check. Despite President Trump publicly urging Israel to halt its bombing operations while negotiations proceed, Israeli strikes have continued. Sources report dozens more Palestinian deaths. I think the latest figure mentioned was 61 just in recent operations.
And Israel's position remains that operations are necessary.
Yes, the Israeli military maintains that areas like Gaza City are still active combat zones with significant terrorist infrastructure that needs to be dealt with. So you have this stark disconnect. Diplomatic signals pointing towards peace talks while intense military action continues.
Which, of course, just exacerbates the humanitarian crisis.
Absolutely. The ongoing strikes, coupled with difficulties in getting aid consistently delivered, are worsening conditions, with reports of increasing famine and continued mass displacement. It's incredible.
So his success reflects that ongoing tension within Europe, that rightward, more nationalist lean in some countries.
It certainly signals that trend is still very much alive, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe. And it's not happening in a vacuum. We saw a related public sentiment playing out elsewhere.
Like the large protests.
Exactly. Massive pro-Palestinian demonstrations were reported across Western Europe. Italy saw calls for a general strike, and London had significant protests with hundreds of arrests following clashes. These protests put domestic pressure on leaders like Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni over their stance on the Gaza conflict. It shows how interconnected these issues are.
Meanwhile, over in Asia, Japan has seen a potentially historic leadership change within its ruling party.
Yes, Sanai Takaichi was elected as the new leader of the Liberal Democratic Party, the LDP. Since the LDP holds the majority, this positions her to become Japan's next prime minister.
Which would make her the first woman to hold that office in Japan.
A major milestone, absolutely, given Japan's traditionally male-dominated political landscape. What's particularly interesting, though, is her political stance.
She's not exactly a moderate.
No, she comes from the LDP's right wing. Her platform is quite conservative, advocating for a tougher stance on China, pushing for increased defense spending, and emphasizing economic security.
So a potential breakthrough for women in leadership, but combined with a fairly hardline conservative policy direction.
Precisely. It's a fascinating combination. Her challenge will be to unite the LDP, which has faced some internal struggles, while navigating those complex regional tensions, particularly with China.
Okay, finally in this section, two quite concerning incidents involving state power clashing with dissent and the press. First, in Armenia.
Yeah, Archbishop Michael Ajupahian, a prominent figure in the Armenian Apostolic Church, was sentenced to 2 years in prison. The charge was inciting a coup.
Inciting a coup? What's the background there?
It seems to stem from deep tensions between the current government, led by Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, and the influential Armenian Church. The Archbishop had been very critical of the government's decision to cede some territory to neighboring Azerbaijan following recent conflicts. The church viewed this as a betrayal.
So the conviction is seen by critics as politically motivated, silencing dissent.
That's certainly the concern being raised, that the judicial system might be used to target powerful opposition figures, especially those challenging government policy on sensitive national issues.
And the second incident, a tragic one, from the conflict in Ukraine.
Yes, a French photojournalist, Antony Lalekin, was killed while working in the Donbass region. Reports indicate he was killed by a Russian drone strike.
Killed by a drone.
Yes, and sources are calling this a grim first, the first confirmed instance of a journalist being killed specifically by a drone strike in this conflict. It's a stark reminder of the dangers journalists face covering the war, and also highlights how drone technology is changing the battlefield, enabling highly targeted strikes even against individuals identified as press.
All right, let's turn our focus now to the domestic situation in the United States, starting with Washington, D.C., where the government shutdown is dragging on.
Now entering its second week, the core issue remains a stalemate in the Senate over funding legislation.
What's the specific sticking point holding things up?
It really boils down to healthcare funding. Democrats are insisting that any funding bill must include money to address expiring subsidies under the Affordable Care Act, the ACA, or Obamacare.
Right, without those subsidies, millions could see sharp increases in their health insurance premiums.
That's the argument. Republicans, on the other hand, want what they call a clean budget bill, without these kinds of additions, which they sometimes refer to as poison pills. So fundamentally, it's a fight over policy priorities attached to essential government funding.
And the human cost is real. We're talking about federal workers.
Absolutely. Nearly 750,000 federal employees are affected. Many are furloughed, sent home without pay, while others deemed essential have to keep working, but won't get paid until the shutdown ends.
And the economic cost.
The estimates are significant. The Congressional Budget Office puts the cost at roughly $400 million per day, just in lost compensation and productivity from these federal workers. It's a substantial hit.
Beyond the paychecks, though, the shutdown has broader economic consequences, right? Like blocking data releases.
Yes, and this is critical for understanding the economy's health. The shutdown has delayed the release of the crucial monthly jobs report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
The report everyone watches markets, the Federal Reserve.
Exactly. Without that data, it's much harder to get a clear picture of the labor market, potential warning signs in the economy, or whether things are improving. It introduces uncertainty and complicates decision-making for businesses and policymakers alike. It's using basic government function as a bargaining chip.
Yeah, I saw Senator John Kennedy quoted calling the whole thing bone deep, down to the marrow, stupid. Seems to capture the frustration.
Slight chuckle. It definitely reflects a certain level of exasperation on Capitol Hill and probably across the country about this kind of legislative dysfunction impacting essential services and economic transparency.
Okay, let's talk immigration policy, which has seen some dramatic moves under the Trump administration. Specifically, the H-1B visa program.
Yes, the H-1B is for highly educated foreign professionals, often in STEM fields. The administration announced a truly massive increase in the petition fee.
How massive?
It's jumping to $100,000 per petition, up from a previous range of around $2,000 to $5,000.
$100,000.
Yeah,
That's a 50-fold increase in some cases. That would fundamentally change the program.
it absolutely would. The administration argues this is necessary to protect American jobs, claiming the program has been used to undercut wages for domestic workers, particularly in tech. India and China are the top countries of origin for H-1B workers.
But businesses rely on H-1B, don't they? Especially in tech and science, to fill specialized roles where they say there aren't enough qualified Americans.
That's the counterargument. Industry groups argue this fee makes it prohibitively expensive to hire needed talent, hindering innovation and potentially driving jobs or investment overseas. They see it as essential for filling critical skill gaps.
And is such a huge fee hike even legal? Can the president just set fees that high?
That's being challenged. Critics argue the president doesn't have the constitutional authority to impose fees of this magnitude without specific authorization from Congress, calling it an executive overreach into Congress's power of the purse. It seems destined for the courts.
Okay, another concerning story involving immigration enforcement in the press. A journalist in Atlanta, Mario Guevara.
Yes, Guevara works for a Spanish-language news outlet there. He was arrested while covering an anti-Trump protest in Atlanta and subsequently deported to El Salvador.
Deported for covering a protest.
That's what's being reported, and it's caused immediate alarm among press freedom organizations and civil liberties groups. They see it as potentially targeting a journalist for covering political dissent, raising serious concerns about the chilling effect on free speech and whether immigration enforcement is being used improperly against the press.
Wow. Okay, on a different immigration note, there was a significant court ruling related to birthright citizenship.
Yes, a positive development for advocates of birthright citizenship. The first U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Boston issued a ruling that prevents the Trump administration from denying citizenship to children born in the United States simply because their parents are undocumented immigrants.
Reaffirming the 14th Amendment.
Exactly. The court explicitly upheld the long-standing interpretation of the 14th Amendment, which grants citizenship to nearly everyone born on U.S. soil. According to the sources, this is the fifth federal court to block the administration's efforts on this front, showing a consistent judicial defense of birthright citizenship.
All right, let's shift to issues of accountability and trust, starting inside the FBI. There are reports about an agent being disciplined for refusing an order related to former FBI Director James Comey.
Yes, this is a strange and troubling story. Apparently, after James Comey was indicted on charges of making false statements and obstruction, there were plans within the FBI for a very public arrest, including a perp walk.
A perp walk? Parading the suspect in handcuffs in front of the media.
Exactly. And according to these reports, at least one FBI agent refused to participate in this planned perp walk for Comey, reportedly citing moral objections to the spectacle. That agent was then allegedly suspended and ultimately fired.
Fired for refusing to participate in a public spectacle involving a former director. What does that imply?
It raises serious questions about the potential politicization of investigations and law enforcement actions. Critics would argue that using a perp walk, especially for such a high-profile figure, prioritizes public shaming and political theater over due process and impartial justice. The agent's refusal and subsequent dismissal suggests pressure within the Bureau to comply with potentially politically motivated actions.
Yeah, that feels uncomfortable. And speaking of trust, public confidence in the traditional media in the U.S. seems to be hitting rock bottom.
The latest Gallup poll numbers are really striking. Overall, only 28% of Americans say they have a great deal or fair amount of confidence in newspapers, TV news, and radio news, just 28%.
And it breaks down along political lines, right?
Dramatically so. Among Republicans, trust has fallen to an astonishingly low 8%. 8%. It's higher among Democrats and independents, but still far from a majority.
What's driving this collapse in trust?
It's likely a combination of factors. The intense political polarization in the country, the rise of partisan media outlets, deliberate campaigns to discredit mainstream news sources, and also the shift in how people consume information, more social media, fewer traditional sources.
With younger generations often relying on platforms like TikTok or even AI chatbots for news now.
Precisely. When there's no longer a widely shared set of facts or trusted intermediaries, it becomes incredibly difficult to have productive public debate or build political consensus. It's a real challenge for democracy.
Okay, let's wrap up with a look at the economy and markets, which seem to be shrugging off the political chaos in Washington.
To some extent, yes. It's been a bit mixed, but surprisingly resilient in places. We saw the Dow Jones Industrial Average surge, adding 400 points recently. The S&P 500 has been hovering near record highs.
So investors aren't too worried about the shutdown or the H-1B fees or geopolitical tensions.
It seems broad market optimism, perhaps driven by expectations of strong corporate earnings, or maybe belief the shutdown won't last too long, is outweighing those concerns for now. It suggests a certain confidence in the underlying economy.
But not everywhere. You said mixed signals.
Right. The NASDAQ, which is heavy on technology stocks, actually turned lower. Some specific high-profile tech companies, Palantir was mentioned, saw their shares drop. So while the broader market looks okay, there's perhaps some caution or sector-specific weakness, particularly in tech where valuations might be stretched.
And what about the job market? Even without the official report, any clues?
The indicators we do have, things like private payroll data or surveys, suggested a bit of a slowdown in September, both the rate of hiring and, interestingly, the rate at which people voluntarily quit their jobs seemed to ease off.
Fewer people quitting. What does that usually mean?
It can suggest workers are feeling a bit less confident about easily finding a better job elsewhere. So, overall, the picture seems to be one of stabilization, maybe, but also some corporate caution. Companies might be pausing major hiring decisions while they wait for more clarity on things like interest rates and, well, whether the government will actually stay funded.
Wow. Okay, that was quite a journey. We went from visualizing light itself to growing mini brains to rogue planets, Caribbean military strikes, Gaza diplomacy, European populism, a U.S. shutdown.
It really covers the spectrum, doesn't it? You see these incredible, almost sci-fi leaps in science and technology happening simultaneously with these really difficult, seemingly intractable political and social problems.
Yeah, the contrast is stark. We're stabilizing qubits for quantum computers while struggling to pass a basic budget. We understand the biology linking obesity and Alzheimer's, but political trust is collapsing.
It really underscores that core tension of our time. Exponential technological capability bumping up against deeply flawed, often gridlocked human systems of governance and accountability.
So that brings us to our final thought. We talked about that rogue planet, Chael 1107-7626, undergoing this massive, uncontrolled growth spurt, just consuming everything around it.
6 billion tons a second. Unchecked growth.
Right. And when you look at the exponential growth we're seeing in areas like artificial intelligence, its capabilities expanding almost uncontrollably. And you pair that with the rising geopolitical tensions, the breakdown of trust, the political paralysis we just discussed.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It does. What rules, what ethical frameworks, what governing principles do we need to put in place now? How do we ensure that human development, our own technological and societal growth spurt, follows a path that's sustainable, accountable, and beneficial?
Instead of just becoming, well, a rogue expansion,
Right.
driven purely by capability without enough wisdom or foresight.
Exactly. Something for all of us, for you listening, to think about as we navigate the complexities ahead.
A profound challenge indeed.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive through another week of critical global developments. We'll be back next time.
For enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.